Imagine you're Lewis, married for 8 years to the loving Agatha, thinking you had a perfect marriage. Suddenly, your wife starts complaining of mysterious pains and continuous malaise, insisting on going to medical appointments alone. One day, when you need to travel for work, Agatha schedules an appointment with a new doctor, but a friend of yours makes a shocking discovery. She wasn't sick, but rather having an affair with the doctor. Now, imagine finding all this out while away from home through photos and accounts of infidelity. Lewis had always believed he had an ideal marriage with Agatha. Together for nearly a decade, their life seemed the portrait of marital bliss, with a charming suburban home and many plans for the future. But things began to change when Agatha, always so vigorous and full of life, suddenly began complaining of strange, persistent symptoms. She spoke of pains that migrated through her body and a fatigue that no sleep could repair. Concerned, Lewis suggested accompanying Agatha to the doctor several times, but she insisted on going alone. "I don't want you to worry, love," she would say with a reassuring smile. "I'll figure out what it is and I'll be fine." Lewis, although reluctant, agreed, trusting in her autonomy without imagining the true intentions behind her solitary appointments. On a sunny autumn day, Lewis had to embark on an unexpected business trip, a crucial 3-day conference in another city. Before leaving, he noticed a certain anxiety in Agatha, different from all the other times. She seemed strangely animated by his impending absence, almost as if she had her own plans for those days. "I have an appointment scheduled with a new doctor to check out these strange pains," she casually mentioned while packing Lewis's suitcase. "Maybe this one can figure out what's going on." The nonchalant way she spoke left Lewis somewhat uneasy, but the rush to not miss his flight prevented him from pondering it further. He kissed Agatha, wishing her luck at the appointment, unaware that this trip would mark the beginning of a devastating discovery. While Lewis was immersed in lectures and meetings, an unexpected event occurred. Josh, a longtime friend, was having lunch at a cafe near the medical clinic when he thought he saw Lewis walking down the street. Surprised, since he knew Lewis was traveling, he decided to follow the familiar figure. The man Josh followed, however, was not Lewis, but someone strangely similar to him, who entered the medical clinic with hurried steps. Intrigued and concerned about the possibility of a case of mistaken identity, Josh decided to enter the clinic to clarify the situation. Inside, what he discovered was not a case of mistaken identity, but a much more shocking and painful reality for his friend. Upon entering the clinic, Josh felt an inexplicable tension in the air. He quietly walked down the hallways, trying not to draw attention, until he heard laughter coming from one of the half-open consultation rooms. Peering discreetly, his heart raced as he recognized Agatha, not as a patient, but in an intimate moment with a man who was definitely not Lewis. They were embraced, and the man was caressing Agatha's hair with a familiarity that went beyond any medical protocol. Shocked, Josh took a few photos with his cell phone, the proof he knew would be devastating for Lewis. With the images stored, he left the clinic as quickly as he had entered, with a heavy weight in his heart, knowing he would have to break the news to his friend. Lewis was sitting in the last row of a monotonous lecture when his phone vibrated with the urgency of a call from Josh. He excused himself and left the room to answer, expecting trivial news or a quick update from a friend. However, Josh's voice was tense and hesitant on the other end of the line. "Lewis, I need you to be prepared for something I'm going to tell you," Josh began, his low voice marked by a gravity that immediately alerted Lewis. The images Josh sent next showed Agatha in clear complicity with another man. When confronted, Agatha's explanations were fragile and desperate. She initially tried to deny the accusations, but the evidence was clear and irrefutable. Eventually, she broke down, admitting her involvement with the doctor had been going on for months, using the appointments as a front for their secret encounters. In the days following his premature return, Lewis found himself in a fog of disbelief and betrayal. He walked through the house he once shared with Agatha, each room filled with memories of a life that now seemed a lie. He decided to investigate further, scouring messages and emails on Agatha's phone while she was out, trying to understand the extent of her deception. Each message between her and Dr. Stevens was like a blow, detailing not only passionate encounters, but also future plans together. The reality that his wife had been planning to eventually leave him for another man was an unbearable thought, fueling a mixture of rage and desolation in his heart. Meanwhile, Agatha, realizing the gravity of her mistake and the risk of losing Lewis, desperately tried to reverse the situation. She left several voicemails and texts for Lewis, each overflowing with emotional pleas and promises of change. In one of the long letters left at the front door, she detailed her feeling of loneliness in recent months, and how that had led her to seek solace in the arms of someone else. Agatha suggested couples therapy and any other measure that could help mend the chasm that had formed between them. However, the betrayal had corroded the foundation of trust that sustained their marriage, leaving Lewis doubtful he could ever forgive her. Driven by a mixture of anger and a need for closure, Lewis arranged a direct confrontation with Dr. Stevens. The confrontation took place in the doctor's office, a sterile environment that contrasted sharply with the emotional tension of the conversation. Lewis stared down the doctor, demanding explanations, while Dr. Stevens, with a disconcerting calm, admitted to the affair without attempting to apologize. "She came to me," he said with an air of indifference, "and things just happened." The coldness and dismissiveness in the doctor's voice only exacerbated Lewis's pain, leaving the office feeling even more betrayed, not just by his wife, but by a man who should have been a pillar of trust and professionalism. After the confrontation with Dr. Stevens, Lewis returned home, a place that now felt strangely silent and empty. He spent hours sitting on the living room couch, staring at the walls that had once echoed laughter and love. The nights were the hardest, with loneliness engulfing him in an emptiness that seemed infinite. During the day, he tried to distract himself with work and activities, but the pain of betrayal always found a way to infiltrate his thoughts. The image of Agatha and Dr. Stevens together tormented him incessantly, a cruel reminder of how his life had been turned upside down. As the days passed, Lewis's sadness began to give way to a bitter determination. He realized he could not allow this betrayal to define the rest of his life. With the support of close friends and family, Lewis began planning his future without Agatha. He consulted a lawyer to discuss divorce, seeking a fair separation that reflected not only the dissolution of his marriage, but also respect for himself and his journey of recovery. Despite the pain, he knew he was making the necessary decisions to rebuild his life on new foundations, learning from the harsh lessons brought by misfortune. After weeks in a state of reflection and seeking counsel, Lewis finally made the decision to move on, officially divorcing Agatha. He sought support in therapy sessions, which helped him process the betrayal and restructure his shattered self-esteem. Over time, he began to rediscover his passions and hobbies that had been neglected during his marriage. Lewis also opened himself up to new friendships and eventually began exploring new relationships with a clearer understanding of what he wanted and deserved in a partnership. Although the path was sometimes lonely, he gradually felt stronger and more prepared to face whatever the future held. And you, what would you do in Lewis's place? Comment on what you would do, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to keep following more stories like this. See you in a new story.